Hello, I'm Valter Longo, Professor Valter Longo, and today I wanted to talk about fasting, mimicking diets, and what it means. I've been working on the fasting mimicking diet for many years. In fact, it's maybe 15 years ago we started a clinical trial on water-only fasting for cancer patients. It turned out that most cancer patients did not want to do water-only fasting, and most oncologists did not want them to do water-only fasting. And so, thanks in part to the funding by the National Cancer Institute of the NIH and also the National Institute on Aging, we developed what's called a fasting mimicking diet or a fasting mimicking program. And so these programs go from, in most cases, from anywhere from 4 days to 7 days, and depending on the type of use. So what is a fasting mimicking diet program? And during fasting, the body essentially switches from a glucose, carbohydrate and glucose based mode, metabolic mode, to a fat burning mode. And so maybe 2 days into the fasting period, fat begins to be broken down, and eventually the fat turns into fatty acids, and then also into what's called ketone bodies, and from this the word ketogenesis. So within a couple of days when we stop eating carbohydrates, the body is now utilizing for energy, is utilizing fatty acids and ketone bodies in addition to sugar. And so what is it in the diet that blocks this effect? And in the diet, mostly it is proteins and certain amino acids within these proteins that are controlling the levels of growth hormone, controlling the level of IGF-1, controlling the level and activity of TOR S6 kinase, and also on the other side, sugars. And sugars are controlling pKa, but probably there's a whole, let's say, anti-fasting network that is regulated by protein amino acids, and sugar. So as long as proteins are high and or sugars are high, then the body does not enter a full fasting response. So what is it that in the diet that we change in the fasting mimicking diet? Well, not surprisingly, the fasting mimicking diet is being developed to, first of all, the calories are lowered or a lot lower than normal. And so, for example, for normal individuals, it's about 1,100 calories on day 1, and then it goes down to 800 calories on days 2, 3, 4, 5. And then the sugars are low, and the protein levels is low, and but the fat is high. And so, and of course, the fat is not just of any kind. The fat that is selected for the fasting mimicking diet are usually healthy or very healthy fats. So the type of fats that are actually associated with longevity extension: olive oil, almonds, walnuts, hazelnuts. These are the type of fats that are usually selected for the fasting mimicking diet. So originally, we did the work in mice, and so we tested all kinds of combinations of all these ingredients, or many ingredients, to get to a point where certain markers, and particularly something called IGF-1, another protein called IGF-PP1, ketone bodies, and glucose in the body were affected in the same way by the fasting mimicking diet as they are affected by the water-only fasting. And so we were trying to achieve this full effect of the water-only fasting. At the same time, the task for the fasting mimicking diet and program was to make sure that the patients did not feel hungry. Of course, is not as equivalent to eating regular food, but certainly we try to get it as close as possible. And also there were issues about the safety, and so we were modifying and developing the FMD in a way that glycemia will not get too low, blood pressure will not get too low. So these are some of the changes that occur during water-only fasting periods. In some patients, most patients do okay, but some patients can get to a very low blood pressure or a very low glucose level, and we were trying to avoid that. And so the interesting thing about the fasting mimicking diet is that it works not only during the period where the person is on it, but also it continues after. And in animal studies, we now know that even days after the return to the normal diet, the fats continue to be broken down. So it is a fat catabolism, or we call fat catabolism mode, that continues even after someone returns to the normal diet. And so in animal studies and human studies is allowing particularly the abdominal fat to be reduced. And so this is one of the of course advantages of fasting and fasting mimicking diet, is targeting these deposits of fat that of course are beginning to be utilized after a couple of days with no food. And so and another example of the fasting response is the activation, at least we know this very well in mice, the activation of stem cells, for example hematopoietic stem cells, the stem cells that circulate in the blood and that give rise to white blood cells, for example. So during fasting, during the fasting mimicking diet and program, these stem cells are elevated, and at the same time, actually, the white blood cells undergo a slight reduction. But then, during the refeeding after the fasting mimicking diet, this white blood cell number comes back to normal. And in mice, we know that this is due to the role of stem cells, blood stem cells, in generating new white blood cells. So essentially, the fasting mimicking diet tricks the body into responding as if it was only on a water-only diet, and the changes that occur during the fasting mimicking diet are very, very similar to those that occur during the water-only fasting. Interestingly, a few years ago, we also published a study where we were looking at inflammatory bowel disease, and in mice at least, we showed that only during the fasting mimicking diet, we saw a repopulation of the gut with certain protective bacteria. So this was called microbiota. So the microbiota profile was improved in the fasting mimicking diet compared to water-only fasting. So there's also beginning to be some evidence that the vegan, high nourishment nature of the fasting mimicking diet, and keep in mind that all the ingredients in the fasting mimicking diet have been selected from those that are commonly used by centenarians all over the planet. And so now we're starting to see some of the benefits of having selected these ingredients, and one of them seems to be the microbiota, and these effects, positive effects on the microbiota. Okay, thank you.